When three young men encountered an elderly man, they thought he'd make an easy target for mockery. He moved slowly, had a noticeable limp, seemed vulnerable. But when the old man rolled up his pant leg and revealed his metal leg, everything changed. And the story behind that metal leg would leave them in shame. Welcome to Daily Soldier Stories. Before we begin this powerful story, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from today. And if you believe military stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button and help us keep these stories alive. It was a sunny and warm Saturday afternoon at Papago Park in Phoenix, Arizona. Families were having barbecues, kids were playing on playground equipment, hikers were walking the desert trails. Perfect weather for outdoor activities. Three young men, Connor, Mason, and Ethan, in their early 20s, had spent the morning at the local gym and were now hanging out at the park. Connor, 23, a community college dropout, creates fitness content on Instagram. Mason, 22, works a part-time retail job and makes prank videos on TikTok. Ethan, 24, between jobs, constantly searching for viral moments on social media. They were sitting at a picnic table, scrolling on their phones, brainstorming their next content idea. "Bro, check this out," Connor showed them a video. "This guy pranking elderly people at Walmart got like 2 million views." Mason laughed. "We should totally do something like that. My followers are getting bored." Ethan scanned around. "Need the right target though, someone who won't fight back or call cops." That's when they spotted him. An elderly man, probably in his late 60s, slowly walking along the main path. There was a noticeable limp in his left leg, taking careful steps, using a simple walking cane. He wore a navy blue baseball cap with U.S. Army veteran embroidered on it, khaki pants, and a plain white polo shirt. Alone, peaceful, with no family around. "Perfect," Ethan whispered. "Look at Grandpa over there." Connor pulled out his phone. This could be good content. Old guy struggling to walk. "What's the angle?" Mason asked. "Just mess with him," Connor said. "Make him self-conscious about his limp. Film his reaction for cringe content." They stood up, walking casually toward the elderly man. Connor secretly set his phone to recording mode. The elderly man, Robert Martinez, was simply enjoying his afternoon walk. It was the first time in weeks his knee felt stable enough for a longer distance. Physical therapy was working, the prosthetic adjustment was going well, and life was slowly improving. Bob was 67 years old, a retired construction foreman from Tucson. He had lost his left leg below the knee in the Iraq War in 2004 during a roadside bomb explosion. It took years of painful rehabilitation, multiple surgeries, and learning to walk again with a prosthetic. But he never gave up, never showed self-pity, just quiet determination and strong will. Today was an especially good day. The weather was perfect, the park was beautiful, and his spirits were high. Simple pleasures that military service had taught him to appreciate. The three young men approached Bob's path, with Connor discreetly recording. "Hey there, sir," Connor started with a friendly tone. "Beautiful day for a walk, huh?" Bob politely nodded. "Yes, it certainly is." "You seem to be taking your time there," Mason commented with a slight grin. "Everything all right?" Bob stopped, leaning on his walking cane. "I'm doing just fine, thank you." Ethan stepped closer. "You sure about that? Looks like you might need some help." "I appreciate the concern, but I'm managing well," Bob responded calmly. Connor became bolder. "Maybe you should find a bench. Rest those legs." "Yeah, or call someone to pick you up," Mason added, barely containing his laughter. Bob's expression remained neutral, but internally he recognized this familiar situation. Young people were sometimes thoughtless, sometimes deliberately mean. He usually just ignored them and continued walking. "I'm perfectly capable of walking, gentlemen," Bob said, attempting to move forward. But Ethan blocked his path. "Whoa there, slow down, speed demon." Connor began exaggeratedly mimicking Bob's gait, limping dramatically. "Is this how you normally walk?" "Pretty entertaining." Mason joined the mockery, copying the limp and making an elaborate show of struggling steps while Connor filmed. Other park visitors started noticing the disturbance. Some looked uncomfortable. A few pulled out their phones, but no one immediately intervened. Bob felt the familiar sting of public humiliation, not for himself, but for the situation these young men were creating. They had no idea what they were mocking. "Please allow me to pass," Bob quietly requested. "Come on, old-timer," Ethan taunted. "Show us that limp again. Bet you're just faking it for sympathy." "Yeah," Connor agreed, still filming. Probably trying to get disability checks or something. Or looking for handouts, Mason added with a cruel laugh. That comment crossed a clear line. Bob stopped completely. He looked directly at each young man, one by one. A calm, measuring stare that carried weight they couldn't understand. "You want to see my limp?" Bob asked quietly, his voice steady. "Hell yeah." Connor was excited. "Show us what's so special about it." Bob carefully set his walking cane aside. Without breaking eye contact, he slowly began rolling up his left pant leg. At first, normal skin appeared. Then, just below the knee, everything changed dramatically. Metal, carbon fiber, sophisticated mechanical joints, an advanced prosthetic leg, clearly expensive medical technology with precision engineering. The three young men's expressions shifted instantly. Laughter died completely. Phones were lowered, mockery evaporated into shocked silence. Bob continued rolling his pant leg higher, revealing the full extent of the prosthetic limb. Where flesh met metal, surgical scars were clearly visible, a clean professional amputation site. "This is my limp," Bob said calmly, his voice carrying quiet authority. "Lost this leg serving in Iraq, March 2004. Roadside bomb. 2 other soldiers were killed. I was fortunate to survive." Complete, absolute silence. Bob began rolling his pant leg back down, covering the prosthetic. "Now, do you gentlemen still find it amusing?" Connor's phone hand was visibly shaking. Mason took an involuntary step backward. Ethan stood frozen with his mouth open. "Sir, we had no idea," Connor stammered. "Obviously not," Bob replied evenly. "You didn't inquire. You simply assumed." "We're really sorry," Mason quickly said. Bob retrieved his walking cane. "Sorry for what specifically? For mocking a disabled veteran? For filming harassment? For assuming I was malingering?" Ethan found his voice. "We didn't mean to." "Didn't mean what?" Bob interrupted, his tone still controlled but firm. "Didn't mean to be cruel? Didn't mean to cause harm? Didn't mean to demonstrate complete lack of respect?" A growing crowd of park visitors was gathering, some recording the incident on their phones. The tables had completely turned. "Delete that video," an elderly woman called out to Connor. "Delete it right now." "Yeah, show some decency," another voice agreed. Connor looked down at his phone, his finger hovering uncertainly over the delete button. Bob stepped closer. "Young man, I served 2 combat tours protecting your right to walk safely in this park. Now you want to post a video mocking me for the sacrifices I made?" Connor's entire body was trembling. "No, sir. I'll delete it immediately." "Don't just delete it," Bob continued. "Learn from it. Understand exactly what you did wrong." Mason had tears forming. "Sir, we're genuinely sorry. We just weren't thinking." "That's precisely the problem," Bob pointed out. "You weren't thinking. Didn't consider who I might be, what I might have endured, why I might walk differently." Ethan stepped forward hesitantly. "How can we possibly make this right?" Bob studied the 3 young men carefully. He saw genuine shame, real regret, authentic remorse. He also recognized a teaching opportunity. "You want to make this right?" Bob asked. All 3 nodded eagerly. "Then listen carefully." Bob gestured toward a nearby picnic table. "Sit down." The 3 young men obediently sat. Bob remained standing, his walking cane planted firmly in the ground. "My name is Robert Alejandro Martinez. I enlisted in the U.S. Army when I was 18. Deployed to Iraq twice. First deployment 2003. Second deployment 2004. He paused, gathering his thoughts carefully. March 23, 2004. Convoy patrol outside Fallujah. Our unit hit an improvised explosive device. The Humvee I was riding shotgun in was thrown 40 feet. The driver was killed instantly. 2 soldiers in the back seat died from their injuries. The young men were listening with complete attention now, all previous attitude completely gone. I remained conscious when they extracted me. I could see my left leg was destroyed below the knee. The combat medic said I was lucky. I missed the femoral artery. I spent 11 months in military hospitals, 16 surgeries, learned to walk again with a prosthetic. Bob sat down beside them, equalizing eye level. "You know what proved most difficult? Not the physical pain, not learning to use the prosthetic. It was returning home and dealing with civilians who saw only the disability, not the person." Connor spoke quietly. "Like we just did." Exactly like you just did, Bob confirmed. Comments about moving slowly, stares, assumptions about my capabilities, people speaking louder as if losing a leg affected my hearing. Mason wiped his eyes. We were terrible to you. You were ignorant, Bob corrected gently. Not terrible. Ignorant. There's an important difference. Terrible implies malicious intent. Ignorant simply means lacking knowledge. Ethan asked seriously. How many other veterans face this treatment? Hundreds of thousands, Bob replied. Visible disabilities, invisible disabilities, PTSD, traumatic brain injuries. We return home changed and society struggles with the adjustment. What should we have done differently? Connor asked. Simple, Bob smiled slightly. Treated me like a normal human being. If you noticed the limp, perhaps offered assistance, or simply ignored it and treated me respectfully. We filmed you without permission, Mason admitted shamefully. That's a separate problem, Bob agreed. Everyone carries a camera now. Everyone seeks a viral moment, but you're filming real people with real struggles. Have you considered the impact on them? Connor looked at his phone with disgust. I was only thinking about views and engagement. Social media culture, Bob nodded understandingly. I comprehend the appeal. But remember, behind every viral video is a real person with real emotions. Ethan hesitantly asked, would you be willing to tell us more about what happened? In Iraq, Bob considered carefully. He rarely discussed deployment details, but these young men seemed genuinely interested in learning. We were providing security for a supply convoy heading to a forward operating base, high-risk area, known for insurgent activity. But the mission was essential. He unconsciously adjusted his prosthetic, a habit when discussing difficult memories. I was the team leader, responsible for 6 soldiers. We'd completed dozens of similar missions. Perhaps we became too routine, too comfortable. Is that why you were hit? Mason asked. Partially. Complacency kills in combat zones, but the enemy also adapted constantly. New tactics, improved explosive devices. We adapted too, but we were always playing catch-up. Connor asked quietly, do you blame anyone for what happened? For getting wounded? Bob shook his head. Number war is inherently unpredictable. People get injured. People die. Blame doesn't restore legs or resurrect fallen comrades. But aren't you angry about it? Ethan pressed. Bob thought carefully before answering. I was angry, for years. Angry at the situation, angry at politicians, angry at myself for surviving when others didn't. The anger was consuming my life. What changed your perspective? Professional therapy. Time. Understanding that anger was poisoning my recovery, not facilitating it. I had a choice, remain bitter or find meaningful purpose. Mason asked, what's your purpose now? Living fully, assisting other veterans with adjustment, demonstrating that disability doesn't equal inability. Connor looked ashamed. We made you feel disabled today. No, Bob corrected. You made yourselves appear ignorant. My disability is a medical reality. Your behavior was a conscious choice. How do we improve ourselves? Ethan genuinely asked. Bob smiled, his first authentic smile of the entire conversation. You're doing it now, asking questions, listening actively, learning. That's all anyone can reasonably expect. A small crowd still maintained a respectful distance. Bob noticed a middle-aged woman approaching hesitantly. Excuse me, she said softly. I wanted to thank you for how you handled this situation. My son is currently deployed in Afghanistan. Watching this gives me hope about his future. Bob stood, greeting her warmly. What's his name and unit? Michael Chen, 10th Mountain Division. Excellent unit, outstanding leadership. He's in capable hands. The woman smiled gratefully and walked away feeling reassured. Connor observed the interaction carefully. Do you do that regularly? Talk with military families? Whenever possible. It helps them, helps me. Shared experience, even if indirect. Mason asked, do you maintain contact with other veterans from your unit? Some. Several didn't return home. A few who did struggle with civilian adjustment. We support each other when feasible. Ethan pulled out his phone hesitantly. Would it be appropriate if... Could we possibly record you sharing your story properly this time? Share it in a positive way? Bob considered the proposal. What's your intention? Because people need to hear it, need to understand veteran experiences, maybe prevent others from making our mistake. What would you do with the footage? Bob asked. Connor answered. Post it respectfully, with your explicit permission. Maybe help educate people about veteran issues. And financial profits? Advertisement revenue from views? The three young men exchanged uncertain glances. They hadn't considered that aspect. Mason spoke up. We could donate any earnings to a veteran charity. Bob raised an eyebrow. Which charity specifically? We honestly don't know any, Ethan admitted. Then research thoroughly. Investigate veteran organizations. Find legitimate ones that actually provide assistance. Wounded Warrior Project, Team Red, White, and Blue. Local American Legion posts. VA volunteer programs. Connor nodded enthusiastically. We'll absolutely do that. And before posting anything, Bob continued, you'll show me the final edited version. My story, my approval required. Completely understood. All three agreed immediately. Bob considered a moment longer. Acceptable, but strict conditions, no exploitation, no sensationalism, no pity the poor veteran narrative, simply an honest account of service, sacrifice, and adjustment. Deal, Connor said without hesitation. They spent the next 2 hours in meaningful conversation. Bob shared deployment experiences, challenges of civilian readjustment, and the process of learning to use a prosthetic. The young men listened intently, asked thoughtful questions, and demonstrated genuine respect. Other park visitors gradually dispersed, satisfied that the situation had resolved constructively. As late afternoon approached, Bob prepared to leave. Before you go, Ethan said, could we ask a personal favor? What would that be? Would you allow us to assist you somehow? We feel terrible about our behavior. Bob smiled genuinely. You've already assisted me significantly. How's that possible? You reminded me that education works effectively, that people can change when shown the truth. That's genuinely hopeful. Connor asked, but is there anything practical we can contribute? Bob thought carefully. Actually, yes. I volunteer at the Phoenix VA Medical Center. I help other amputees adjust to prosthetics. We could use dedicated young volunteers. What would our responsibilities be? Mason asked. Spend time with patients, listen to their stories, assist with physical therapy exercises, provide basic human interaction and support. Ethan nodded immediately. We're committed. It's not easy work, Bob warned. You'll encounter people at their lowest points. Depression, anger, despair. Some won't be pleasant to you. We understand, Connor said. After today, we understand why. And absolutely no cameras, Bob emphasized. No content creation, no social media posts, pure service. Completely agreed, all three said simultaneously. Bob stood and gathered his walking cane. Phoenix VA Medical Center, Tuesday evening, 6 p.m. Ask for the volunteer coordinator. Tell them Bob Martinez sent you. We'll definitely be there, Mason promised. One final thing, Bob added. Your behavior today was wrong, but your willingness to learn and change, that gives me hope for your entire generation. As Bob walked away, the three young men remained seated, processing the profound experience. We really screwed up badly, Connor said quietly. Yeah, Ethan agreed, but we're going to do much better. Mason looked at his phone, opened the TikTok app, and began deleting previous videos that mocked others, starting immediately. The following Tuesday, true to their word, Connor, Mason, and Ethan appeared at the Phoenix VA Medical Center. Nervous, uncertain, but determined to follow through. The volunteer coordinator, Carmen Rodriguez, a veteran herself, greeted them with skepticism. Bob Martinez sent us, Connor explained. We want to help with the amputee support program. Carmen studied them carefully. Bob doesn't usually refer people our way. What's your connection to him? Mason answered honestly. We made a serious mistake, treated him disrespectfully. He educated us properly. Now we want to make genuine amends. What kind of mistake exactly? Ethan explained the park encounter, their behavior, and Bob's response. Carmen listened without interruption. And you believe volunteering here will fix that? Carmen asked skeptically. No, Connor replied, but maybe it'll help us understand what we did wrong, and possibly help other people. Carmen made her decision. All right, but the rules are absolutely strict. Respect every single patient. No phones whatsoever, no photographs, no personal questions unless freely offered. These men and women have trusted us with their recovery process. Don't betray that trust. Over the following weeks, the three young men learned far more than they had anticipated. They met veterans from multiple conflicts: Vietnam, Gulf War, Iraq, Afghanistan, peacekeeping missions worldwide. They heard stories of courage, loss, adaptation, and remarkable resilience. Most importantly, they learned to see beyond disabilities to complete human beings. Fathers, mothers, students, professionals, individuals who happened to have service-connected injuries. Connor particularly connected with a Marine named Rodriguez, who'd lost both legs in an Afghanistan IED blast. Rodriguez, initially hostile toward the young volunteers, gradually warmed to Connor's genuine interest in learning. "Why are you really here, kid?" Rodriguez asked one evening. Connor shared the honest story about the park encounter. Rodriguez listened, then laughed appreciatively. "Bob got you good, didn't he?" "He completely changed our perspective," Connor admitted. "That's Bob's specialty. He converts enemies into allies. That's why he's effective at this work." Mason developed a friendship with a female Army veteran, Sarah Johnson, who'd lost her right arm in a convoy attack. Sarah taught him about adaptive technology and demonstrated how her prosthetic arm functioned. "The worst aspect isn't the physical limitation," Sarah explained. "It's the social awkwardness. People don't know how to behave around us." "Like we did with Bob," Mason said. "Exactly. But you learn from it. Most people never get that opportunity." Ethan gravitated toward group therapy sessions, listening to veterans discuss adjustment challenges, PTSD, depression, relationship difficulties, employment obstacles. "Military service changes you fundamentally," the group leader explained. "Combat especially. You witness things, experience things, endure things that civilians cannot comprehend. Returning home means learning to coexist with those memories." Ethan began understanding that visible injuries like Bob's prosthetic were often easier to address than the invisible wounds of psychological trauma. 3 months later, Bob attended the Volunteer Appreciation Dinner at the Phoenix 5A Medical Center. He was surprised to see Connor, Mason, and Ethan receiving recognition for outstanding volunteer service. "Didn't expect this development," Bob told Carmen. "Those young men have been completely transformed," Carmen replied. "They started roughly, but they're among our most dedicated volunteers now. The patients genuinely love them." During dinner, Connor approached Bob's table. "Mr. Martinez, thank you for what you did for us." "I didn't do anything extraordinary," Bob replied modestly. "You changed our entire perspective, taught us genuine empathy, showed us the path to become better people." Mason and Ethan joined the conversation. "We wanted to show you something," Mason said, pulling out his phone. Bob tensed slightly. "I thought we agreed." "Not about you specifically," Ethan quickly clarified. "About what we learned from you." They showed Bob a series of posts on their social media accounts. No veteran mockery whatsoever. Instead, educational content about veteran issues, volunteer opportunities, and respectful military appreciation posts. "Our follower count initially dropped," Connor admitted, "but engagement significantly improved. People respond positively to meaningful content. And we've recruited over 20 new volunteers for various veteran organizations," Mason added proudly. Bob smiled warmly. "Now that represents meaningful impact." Ethan pulled out a carefully folded paper. "We wrote something. Would you read it?" Bob unfolded the handwritten letter. "Mr. Martinez, 3 months ago, we were ignorant young men who thought mocking others was entertainment. You taught us that behind every person is a story we don't know, struggles we can't see, courage we can't imagine. Your patience in educating rather than condemning us changed our lives completely. We're better men because of your example. Thank you for your service, your sacrifice, and your forgiveness. Connor, Mason, Ethan." Bob felt genuine emotion welling up. "This means more than you can know." "One more thing," Connor said. "We researched that charity idea. We found a legitimate organization providing prosthetics to veterans. We made a substantial donation in your name." "Using money from positive content?" Bob asked. "Partially, but mostly from part-time jobs we obtained. Turns out helping people feels infinitely better than exploiting them." A year later, Bob continued volunteering at the Phoenix VA, but now with a regular team of young assistants. Connor, Mason, and Ethan had recruited friends and created an informal network of youth volunteers supporting veteran programs throughout Arizona. Their social media presence grew substantially, but focused on education and awareness rather than entertainment. Comment sections filled with respectful discussion rather than cruel mockery. One day, Bob received a message from a complete stranger. "Saw the video about your story. My brother is a disabled veteran who struggled with severe depression after losing his leg in Afghanistan. Your example gave him hope and inspiration. He's doing much better now. Thank you for your service and your wisdom." Similar messages arrived regularly. The story had spread beyond Phoenix, inspiring other communities to examine how they treated disabled veterans and differently abled individuals. Bob reflected on the incident that had initiated everything. 3 young men mocking his limp in a public park. He could have responded with justified anger, could have ignored them completely, could have allowed bitterness to consume him. Instead, he chose education over condemnation, patience over anger, hope over despair. That single choice changed a minimum of 4 lives, his own and 3 young men. But the ripple effects continued spreading indefinitely. At a recent veteran appreciation event, a young soldier approached Bob. "Sir, you probably don't remember me, but I was at Papago Park that day. Watching from a distance, I witnessed the entire incident." Bob vaguely recalled the crowd gathering. "I was about to intervene, stop those guys from harassing you, but I watched how you handled the situation instead. You taught them rather than punishing them. It made me reconsider my own approach to conflict resolution." "How so specifically?" "I was carrying tremendous anger about my deployment experiences. I wanted to lash out at civilians who didn't understand military life. But you demonstrated a different approach. Education builds bridges. Anger constructs walls." Bob nodded approvingly. "What did you do with that realization?" "I started volunteering with youth mentorship programs, teaching teenagers about military service, but also about conflict resolution, empathy, and understanding differences." "And the results?" "Remarkable. Young people respond to honest conversation better than lectures. When you treat people with respect, even when they haven't earned it, they usually rise to meet that standard." Bob smiled knowingly. "Sometimes they do indeed." Robert Martinez's story isn't a revenge story. It's a transformation story. How one moment, one choice, one patient response can change lives fundamentally. That day at Papago Park, Bob faced 2 paths: anger or education, humiliation or hope, bitterness or bridge building. He chose education. And that choice didn't just change 3 young men. It touched a community, influenced online culture, and raised veteran awareness nationwide. Because real strength isn't physical. It's not about having all limbs or a perfect body. Real strength is emotional resilience, the ability to respond to cruelty with kindness, ignorance with patience, and mockery with dignity. Bob lost his leg serving his country honorably, but he gained something precious: perspective. Understanding that everyone fights battles others can't see. Everyone deserves basic human respect. And most importantly, people can change dramatically. Ignorance can become understanding. Cruelty can transform into compassion. Mockery can evolve into service. Connor, Mason, and Ethan were cruel young men that day. Today, they're dedicated veteran advocates. Transformation is possible when someone takes the time to teach rather than condemn. Have you ever experienced such a moment? Someone you judged unfairly? Someone who educated you about your prejudices? Someone who showed patience when you deserved anger? As Daily Soldier Stories, we'll continue sharing military stories. Because every veteran has a story worth telling. Every soldier has a sacrifice worth honoring. And sometimes, the most powerful lesson comes not from a lecture, but from simple human interaction. If this story touched you, subscribe and share. And remember, next time you see someone different, someone struggling, someone you don't understand, pause. Ask yourself, what's their story? What battles have they fought? What sacrifices have they made? Because behind every limp, every scar, every difference, there's a human being worthy of respect. And sometimes, that respect can change everything.